Hi, Susan. Thanks for joining. Really appreciate your time and look forward to the conversation. You are COO, is that right, of K20 Connect?
Yeah,
Okay. You want to tell us a little about
yeah,
yourself? What's your background?
sure. I would love to. Anytime I get to talk with you, Sam, it's always a great conversation, and I always leave thinking about things for maybe even days after we're done talking. So, super excited to have these conversations. Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Gentz. Sam mentioned I'm with K20 Connect, and I come from a policy background. I started in the Iowa House of Representatives and was in the United States Senate as the Every Student Succeed Act was going through and got super excited about flexibility within federal law. And this was all way before generative AI was about to come out. So it was exciting then, and it is exciting now. Policy never seems to be dull. There's always stuff going on that we can do with it. And we're here to talk to you a little bit about what's going on in the country and with Sam's great expertise, try to talk about maybe where things should go versus where we are right now.
Yeah, precisely. I think there's some big gaps. I mean, there's a couple of things I guess we can kind of start the conversation with picking a spot to begin. We have between us a great deal of experience at the board level, at the district level, at the building level, of course, if we're talking about administrative policy and what do you do if you have a situation where someone's asked to be put on or forced to be put on administrative leave for some kind of activity that could be cybersecurity related, or God forbid, something like a deep fake. We have experience at the board level. We do a lot of advice, a lot of advisory services, a lot of consultative services at that level. At the state level, we're working with representatives in a couple of different states today, helping them to draft some legislation on how to make some headway positively in their communities. And then, of course, we follow everything at the national level as well. In the international, if God willing, if we have the opportunity to work on some policy documentation for organizations like ISTE, COSIN, we even work at that level. So where do you recommend we start? Where's the most movement happening, or maybe where there's no movement happening that we need to address that?
Yeah. I think starting at the federal level, Sam, is a great place to start because we now have executive order from the president as of a week and a half-ish ago at the time of this recording, where the states have no ability to enact AI policy on their own. They could be faced with some major penalties if they decided to go against that executive order. So that puts everybody in kind of a weird tension because we all know that we need to be doing something to make sure things are protected, while also not being able to actually regulate. So, when we look at what states were doing prior to the executive order, it was really a lot of task forces and gathering information and trying to kind of get stakeholder buy-in and input. So it's not like states are really taking a step back from that executive order, but it really is going to be very challenging to implement anything that would put those recommendations into practice or action. So, there's a lot of recommendations out there for kind of what states could have been doing before this. And I'm sure Sam will come back and update this once the federal government moves on something or the executive order is reversed or whatever happens. We can't predict that with our crystal balls quite yet. But all that to say, the environment is now changing from regulating to really educating. Sam has done such a great job in some of our conversations, kind of pointing this out to policymakers, especially as you mentioned, we're working with some of the states. Okay, if states can't really implement any laws on it, what can they do? And that is create spaces to educate.
Yeah, yeah. I was just I was thinking the same thing. I feel like depending on maybe the political leanings, the political environment of the state that you work in, might have more or less impact on how you operate on a daily basis in your community, your learning community. This is obviously more or less a conversation for and around Nebraska, and so I don't know if you want to comment on that. What your thoughts are there, Susan? Like, clearly there are efforts prior to the word of this moratorium, if you want to call it that, there were some efforts actually in the Nebraska House that we were made aware of to make some of those changes. But how does that really impact kind of boots on the ground in the district?
Yeah, I think, that's really where your board policy is going to have the most impact, right? And we talk about how local policy is kind of the most important to us because it impacts our daily life more than things at the federal or even state level. So I think a lot of this conversation really we will focus on some board policy opportunities because that's what's going to impact this audience the most. So I do have a couple of examples. It's really interesting that I was looking through, and there's all of these national organizations that pride themselves in releasing policy frameworks and policy recommendations and helping districts to understand and do things in the policy realm. But I was looking to see a lot of those recommendations as I prepared for this conversation, and all of them wanted you to put your email in to pay something. I was have like really struggling to find that information. And I thought if me as, someone who's not in the district, but still very interested and invested in this conversation doesn't have access to that, how much harder it must be for someone in the district. And for me, that was something I just want to call it out for our friends on the association side and the think tank side of release that. Help us try to see your research and implement it in ways that are helpful.
I mean, are there examples of folks that have posted like that you've seen some really great examples?
So the one that was the most easily accessible as I was searching was from the NEA. And theirs was very vague, which is good for recommendations, right? You don't want to get too deeply into the weeds of that. But they had 5 bullet points about the use of AI in the district and what the district will ensure. And a lot of that goes to students and educators remaining at the center of education, evidence-based AI technology that will enhance the educational experience, the ethical development and use of AI technology, and strong data protection practices, and ongoing education with and about AI for all students and educators. So those are all really great principles. But if you're a district leader or sitting on a board, that still leaves a lot for you to have to figure out what that means in your district.
Do that. Yeah. That's, yeah. Who's got the training for that? It's like that's a big concern as well. Like even like listening to those bullets and I'm thinking in my mind, I'm like, well, that's going to look differently for, um, for Omaha. It's going to look differently for Oglala. It's going to look differently for Miami. It's going to look differently for New York. So, um, that I could definitely see that being a challenge. And there's
Yeah.
historically not a lot of expertise to draw from internal to any district, large or small. But it can be particularly challenging for small districts, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that the NEA did besides those bullet points was they did provide a few definitions. And as we kind of go through a couple of these other board policies that I found that I thought were some of the ones that were a little bit more advanced, um, the definitions come up in every single one, right? That's a hugely important part to policy. So even if you're not exactly sure what you want to do or how you want to do it, starting with being very clear on what things mean is going to be the absolute baseline. And so what NEA defined was algorithmic bias, intelligence, AI literacy, data governance, generative AI, transparency. And those are all things that are very important, but obviously not an exhaustive list of definitions that we need to be thinking about in an era where things are moving so quickly.
Well, here's a question, not to derail, I guess, but what does that relationship? What does that relationship really look like to the educator? Because I feel like we're missing the policy guidance at so many levels, but for a teacher just trying to be and trying some of the tools they find online, some of them might be free and they might, kind of run that up the flagpole. And as often occurs with IT things, historically, we say, "Hey, we got nothing against this. Like, there's no rule says I can't do this, so I want to go ahead and implement that." So where's the danger? Like, do you have any Any thoughts on the risk from the classroom perspective?
Yeah, I mean, this just reminds me of when ESSA was going through and we created through that bill was the Privacy Technical Assistance Center, PTAC. And that organization at the federal level was to really help districts understand FERPA and these other privacy laws that we have on the books, right? There's not really a technical assistance center for AI that I'm aware of. Someone can prove me wrong if they know about it. But if it exists, there's for sure no funding for it. So I'm not sure how they're paying people to be experts, unless it's coming out through some other think tank or nonprofit or something. But honestly, I think that the establishment of something like that, I guess maybe what would it be? AI TAC, the Artificial Intelligence Technical Assistance Center, might be something that would be really helpful when you're trying to think through these as an educator or even an administrator. Now, I know for teachers, a lot of you, there's no time in the day for these kinds of conversations, and I totally get that. But finding that expertise, the other thing that there was a guy who used to run PTAC, and he would say, when it says, when you check that box on any new service and it says, I agree and understand everything that I'm clicking to, nobody reads that, but they all click the box. And I would argue that in our time right now, as daunting and fine print and legal jargon as it may be, it is increasingly important to make sure that we actually read that before we check the box, because we do not know, is that AI training models based off of us? Is it, what is it doing with that information? What's it doing with proprietary information? Um, Understanding those as we find a new product that maybe has AI built into it, I would just argue, I think the best practical tip I could say is actually read that. Don't just click the box.
There's so many opportunities to set yourself up for potential liability, but also just, I mean, you have to think about the future of these young people um, we're supposed to be protecting, but opening up all these different avenues, opening up all these doors to letting their data kind of get siphoned off. I have my own concerns about the paid services, of course. I anything that anything that's free, you have to ask yourself, am I the product, right? Like, am I actually the
Yeah.
product here? If this is at no cost, then they're probably selling your data. Like, that's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
Um, just going backwards a little bit again, where are in your conversations, where are the gaps? Like, where are the things that really worry you, that trouble you? Like, say, like, oh my gosh, we policy, yes, we need policy for many, many, many things, but where's the thing that like really kind of scares you, kind of like makes you say, oh my goodness, this is a real serious gap that we have to address.
Yeah. I think just it's really hard because with AI, we could do something where perhaps it could launch someone into their future career, right? There is so much cool stuff that we could be doing with new tools. We can help people learn. We can get that, we can figure out what students are interested in and do that thing we've been trying to do forever with personalized learning, which is meet them where they
Better than
are.
before. Better than ever before, right?
Yes,
With AI. Yeah. Yeah.
incredible opportunities, right? And like, I mean, I do this on a small scale with my 7-year-old, right? Where, when he was 3 and we had his cars out, I would say, here's your 10 cars because you love cars and that's going to keep your attention. Take 3 of them away. How many are left? Like, we learn subtraction through moving cars around, right? AI can do this at scale. It can do it for older kids way more advanced than the way I'm
Yeah.
doing my personalized learning. But so for me, I get so excited because I'm like, the way we can figure out what students are interested in and tailor things that are hard to what they'll stay interested in, to me is like so exciting. The other side of the coin is that then the AI knows what they're interested in. And how can that take it and do other things that I don't necessarily want to happen to my kid? And in my dream world, and maybe someday, maybe someone in Nebraska, you guys might have a connection for me. If I could talk to Sam Altman or any of the fathers of AI, if I could ask them, what are you most worried about? Because they're not ever going to publicly tell us that, right? Um, if I could figure out in their minds what they're worried about, then I think that we could so much better craft policy. because I think right now we're trying to craft policy off all of the things we've been scared of, that
Yeah,
FERPA and HIPAA and SOPIPA at the state level, we've tried to address all the things that we're scared of, but I think my biggest thing is we don't know what to be scared of yet.
precisely.
And you can't
I
regulate
couldn't
that.
I couldn't agree more. It reminds me years ago when I was in a classroom, uh, and then the comment back then was, the challenge, I guess, if you want to frame it that way, was we've got kindergartners entering kindergarten, and we're supposed to prepare them to be good citizens and for jobs that they're going to have 20 years from now, right? And we don't even know what those
Mhm.
jobs are if they exist.
Mhm.
Now, we said that, mind you, we said that back in the 90s, right? Like
Yeah.
for forever. We've always done that. And now we're
Yeah.
kind of to the point where in my experience, like right now, right this second, I don't even know if my job is going to exist in like 6 months, much less, 20 years, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
I think I think going back to my question, where's the policy gap? Maybe for me, I think the policy gap is like I just think there's not a public understanding of the problem. We haven't even started the problem statement. We don't even know what the heck we're trying to address or talk about.
Yeah.
So that,
Yeah.
ironically, this conversation is kind of a compendium to a course that is on um, cybersecurity, ethics of AI, and generally risk management around those two areas. What are your thoughts around maybe how we're not even framing the problem correctly? What are your thoughts on that? Like maybe from the leadership perspective or even lawmaker.
Yeah. I mean, this is again something where I know what is, and it's really hard for me to know what's coming.
Yeah.
And then policy always operates behind anyway. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it gets really hard to uneven if you don't know. I think what we're gonna see though, I can tell you this, I can answer this question. What we're gonna see is a lot of vague regulation and a lot of vague legislation. And I think that's gonna be true even when the federal government decides to do something. Because like you said,
True.
there's not a big enough pool of expertise. And if
Yeah.
you don't have experts writing policy, then all you're gonna have is really bad unintended consequences. So you want to make sure that you have the experts writing the law because they'll be able to see, oh, well, this is going to happen down the road where when you've got people at the federal level who have really probably been influenced their tech knowledge based like on those big technology companies who aren't being quite as transparent about what the downfalls are because they're getting a lot of investors who only want the good news, right? And I'm sorry if that is sounding a little cynical as the words come out of my mouth, but
It's
when
an
you think
industry.
about
It is an
who's
industry.
it is, and it's lobbying, right? So you like who when I was a staffer on the Hill, you took meetings with your biggest donors, right? I mean, you would still meet with the families and your constituents and stuff like that, but when it came to crafting bills, you would be in a back room with 10 staffers from at least when I was there, both parties. We would be both parties in the room and we would all be talking, but all of us had heard from the same people. And so it was a lot of us trying to put different notes together, right? On did they tell us the same thing as they told you? Because that's always something that you need to see if that's happening. But also, no matter who they were talking to, it was all the positive, bright, shiny, good things about what was happening, which makes it really hard to regulate the bad things when you can't know what they are.
Now we were talking about some gaps, and now you said bad things that kind of made me pop into my mind. I reside in Florida, and Florida has one of the very few laws that has a statute around using the likeness of another person. We've referred to it often as the sextortion law. But in terms of policy gaps, what we haven't really talked about is those negative outcomes. Now, we're not saying necessarily criminal behaviors, but one of the stories that is near to me geographically was here in Florida, and there was an educator, I think it was an athletic director, maybe I can't remember the story exactly, an athletic director that had posed as a superintendent, I believe, and said some horrible, disparaging, kind of anti-Semitic things as kind of a deep fake, and that was on their personal social media. It wasn't on district equipment, using district laptop, using district systems, etc. You know, I guess for me, like, what are your thoughts on how do we start to address those kind of things when maybe the district itself is maybe at odds with the politics of the state in terms of like not wanting to create legislation or not wanting to create policy, not wanting to create, boundaries, artificial guardrails, whatever the case may be. Where do those conversations need to begin, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think the only place they can begin right now is at the district level. I think the states could face penalty if they tried to do something around that. And so how that trickles down to districts is still kind of a mystery to me,
Yeah.
but there was no moratorium on districts being able to implement their own policies. And so you have real everyday challenges that you are facing in the new era of generative AI. And that means that you need to be able to act appropriately for situations that arise. And I think that if you did that and someone came back and said, no, you can't do that, then that would be a great case to start creating precedent. So we can, it's scary because there is potential for some sort of, slap on the wrist, but we can't just stop. We cannot be. And the thing is I agree generally with the federal government that we don't really want to patchwork state by state
Yeah.
AI. I agree with
Sure.
that because I think that does leave a lot of room for errors, human error, for the computer glitches. The it shows how much I know how AI works, but how everything works together. Um, I agree generally that the federal government should have some sort of standard. And then if states wanted to go above and beyond what the federal government says, great. That's how a lot of things work. We have FERPA, then we had SOPIPA. FERPA was our guideline that was, enacted in the 1970s and hasn't really been updated since. So it kind of operates under a we still keep all of our records in a file cabinet with a key type of vibe. So we have SOPIPA that was then enacted in the, 2010s when we had that avalanche of legislation across the states that are like, you know what, we're going to update our own privacy laws at the state level. And then we had the GDPR, right? Like that's European standards, but a lot of people just started bringing some of that over. So as I'm good with the federal government having a baseline for something, that makes sense to me. Where the problem is that the federal government has shown no indication that this will happen quickly. And so you can't make everyone stop on the ground without knowing when something could be coming. And this kind of goes back to that privacy conversation where Congress kept saying, we're going to update FERPA. We're going to update it. We're going to update it. And so states were like, okay, cool. We'll just chill till you do that. And then they kept not doing it in every session. It kept not happening. And it was this big game of chicken between the federal government and the states. And that's really like I'm getting a little deja vu with how that's kind of feeling, except for now, states were told you cannot do anything, where that never happened on that privacy conversation.
I mean, that's got to be very stressful for classroom teachers. For those of us who may have influence, who are watching this video, who may have influence either at let's say, a committee level, maybe an IT steering committee, maybe they're a representative as an advisor to the board, to the school board. Maybe they have a voice of some kind. Do you have advice for both of those two different personas? So, do you have advice for a teacher who finds himself asking, there is no policy. What do I do? Should I be worried? Should I be afraid? And then also for the ones who maybe do have a voice, who can maybe speak up and kind of offer some insights. Do you have advice in either one of those contexts?
Yeah, I'll start at the district leader, which is like over communicate. Over communicate with your teachers what is okay and what is not. Maybe it's not official board policy, but I do know a lot of districts that have the superintendent must have final say over this, or, kind of clauses like that within theirs. If that is you as a superintendent, over communicate. Yes, this tool is allowed. No, it is not. And maybe even give them reasons why. Because a lot of teachers might say, well, it's just because that's the one that he knew I wanted, or, whatever, all the stuff that happens in a school on an everyday basis. But so for superintendents, I think you cannot communicate too much in this. And that kind of comes back to the educate, not regulate piece. make sure people know what is okay and what is not and why. I think that will solve a lot of problems on the ground. For the teacher, I would say don't be scared to ask your principals, your superintendents. I feel like, a lot of time I think teachers are like, we don't want to bug them with this question or whatever. This is a time to bug, because this is so new. There's not precedence, as we talked about. This is something where this is not a bother. This could be a major protection for your district, or it could be a really great tool that's okay, and you can go forward being free knowing that you have the okay. I think that's a big difference of the like, if you're stressed, you're worried about it versus I got the okay, and we're going to use this to change student lives. This, I think that's really, I think it's really coming down to communication on both sides of it.
I've heard people say, guardrails, we shouldn't stifle innovation. We should be encouraging and empowering. I think of it like the bumpers, in bowling.
Yeah, yeah,
You don't want
yeah.
guardrails per se to crash your car. You want some bumpers just to kind of softly nudge you down. Like we want to go this direction. We want to do it safely. Um,
Yeah,
how about
yeah.
this
And
question?
that's, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was to say, when we look at what the states are doing and the trends, that balancing guardrails and innovation is like the number one thing on the minds of state leaders, state
Yeah.
policymakers. And then focusing on that guidance in the task force reports. And then, this one's been really big too, and kind of comes back to the personalized learning, but aligning instruction and developing the workforce. I think those all kind of tie into having good guardrails because if they're too tight, you are not going to help anyone on that.
Let's come back to the kind of the CTE, the kind of creating, future pathways for learners.
Sure.
But before we do, I have a quick question. What are your thoughts? Do you have advice? Do you have a stance on where policy should exist, how it should exist? Like, for example, there's always the kind of the question of does AI policy, not a piece of paper, the guidance, does AI policy belong in kind of a multi-threaded, integration into multiple policies? For example, if we have I'm just thinking out loud here, if we have an IT security policy, do we have something about AI specifically, defining how we go about risk management for onboarding new AI tools, or how we allow new tools to be turned on inside of tools we already pay for, subscribe to? It's an enhancement versus maybe an AI policy that's kind of separate, kind of siloed out. What are your thoughts
Mhm.
there? Do you have a perspective?
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be siloed out because we've actually had policy for AI in our policies for a long time. It's the generative AI that's
Yeah.
really throwing us
Oh
for
yeah,
a loop,
that's
right?
true.
And so if we have some of that already in, then really it is just updating to make sure that the nomenclature and the language match the current environment. So it's not like you have to start from scrap either as you're looking at your AI policies. You just need to make sure that whatever you're updating matches the environment that you're in. But there's a lot of these district policies that go back to those questions, Sam. So what do we have for student use? What are our regulations for student use? What's restricted AI access? What's approved AI tools? Academic integrity and acceptable use. That's a huge one. Digital citizenship, parents and guardians. What does that mean for parents outside of the school walls? And then, we've got some for instructional and administrative staff. So, classroom use, privacy compliance, professional development, classroom guidelines. There really has been a lot of thoughtful policies put on the books in order to really help be clear on what everyone can and cannot do, and also the evaluation and monitoring of it. Because this is going to be the other thing is as everyone implements a whole bunch of new AI tools in the classroom, is it effective? We really need to make sure that the risk is worth the use of whatever we're picking.
Flashbacks to the days of the whiteboards. Remember the interactive whiteboard? Everybody had to
Oh
have one. It
yeah.
was going to change everything. I'm like, how much did that actually really impact when you got down to it, right?
Yeah,
And
it was an
maybe it
expensive
could have been.
whiteboard in a lot of cases. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it
That's
could have
a
been impactful if there was,
yes.
the recommended training and professional development to really know how to
Yes.
make it work. Kind of the same thing with
Yes.
AI. I do think the
Oh,
difference in in terms of tools, though, I really do believe because AI is so pervasive and it could be you gave an example earlier. You said something to the effect of, that personalized learning, like it could adapt a lesson and give, a student have an interest in Star Wars and their ADHD and their boy and they're in the seventh grade, and AI could kind of turn something up and make algebra so much better than say, the normal kind of sit and get approach that might be the norm. I just wonder how fast things are changing. If that does make it a little different, where we do have to kind of think, okay, we've got to democratize access to these tools. We've got to democratize access to the training, and we have to have some kind of expectation for the educator here and the leadership to kind of say, look, no one's going to come in and save us. Nobody's going to come and teach us everything they know about AI. Nobody's going to be able to protect us. We're not going to be able to go to Sam Altman and say, hey, could you give us a chat GPT that's FERPA compliant and yada, yada, yada for this district? It's not going to happen. So
Yeah.
how do we create those opportunities to put enough information out there in a way that's actually manageable, that can be consumed? And thankfully we have courses like Nebraska is using now to help with that. But I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there are a couple of board policies that actually have accessibility clauses in there too, to kind of make sure that that is staying fair and open for everyone who can use it. But yeah, there's so many thoughts I'm having as you're saying these things that I'm trying to figure out where to start. But so, like in Iowa City, Iowa, they have accessibility. Is the tool available to students of all abilities? If not, what comparable alternatives will be offered to ensure an equitable learning environment for all students? This is something that districts are trying to put into their policies and make sure they're at least asking the question. Now, no alternative may exist. So then how does how does that work? Do the other students not get access to it?
That's a great, just for my clarification. So are we talking about um, some students may have $20 that their parents have a credit card access to get ChatGPT Pro versus, other students have access to that kind of technology? Is that the kind of thing we're talking about, or is it a little deeper?
I think it's deeper than that. I think that if the school is going to buy a product, that's it's not going to be the money part of it,
Mm,
right? They're going to
okay.
have access to that. It's going to be, what about students who are blind? What about students who are deaf? What about
Ah,
special ed students, dyslexic students? Is this something that we can find that everyone will have access to the same kind of thing? Is it adaptive, right? Is this tool adaptive for anyone who needs it?
got it, got it, got it. Yeah, sometimes on these calls and these webinars and these conversations like this one that we see online, it's a lot of negativity. But I have to say, one thing I am excited about, I really am. I'm excited about the opportunity for my kids, and we obviously we both have kids. My three boys, I think, are going to have opportunities to know their strengths, know their tendencies, know their data trends, know their whatever, better than I ever was when I was a young boy, because we have all these AI tools, and it's that
Yeah.
individualized instruction that's kind of out of the box through some of these automated functions. So I am excited about that. I really am. It's just my fear is that we're not going to be able to keep up with the peripheral things that we need to talk about from a district level, and that classrooms may kind of get a little far out, that might be uncomfortable for districts, and downright unsafe in some cases, and that's not going to be something that policy is going to have an answer for. So when we see these things happening, they may have big benefits, but they also could be significant risks. And so, yeah, that's where I feel like policy is kind of failing us. But um, are we trending in the right direction, at least, do you think?
I think that we're making progress on it. I mean, the fact that I was able to just go look up several districts that had policy on the books published on their website for anyone to go look, I think that that's, a year ago, it would have been a lot harder. I think that we are trying to think through and be proactive about the risks and what might happen. It's also just really interesting that generative AI and everything is blowing up at the same time that Jonathan Haidt and the anxious generation seems to be taking over a lot of the culture and a lot of the schools. And so he is basically like no screen time. We've got districts moving away from one-to-one devices now.
Phones.
We've
Yeah,
got, yeah, like, yeah, the phones in the lockers. And I think it's really interesting that that is coming at a time when technology is blowing up and the culture is pushing back. And I think that that's making it even harder for policy too at this point.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. And it, the delusion of truth, like truth is just being diluted everywhere you look, and there's too much information. There's too many versions of things. The deep fake is a challenge. Um,
Yeah.
it, it's there's never been a time when I think we needed more human conversation, real conversation. That's the only way that you can have anything that's really real now. Like, I know you,
Yeah.
I know who you are. We can
Definitely.
have like a real conversation, right? On a human level.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the other thing, like what you're excited about AI, mine is I think that career exploration is going to start a lot
Oh
younger.
gosh, yeah.
That's what I'm excited about because as you said, like we will be able to identify very early what subjects and interests and even what lessons in the chapters, right? That kids are really, really excited about. And not that you have to pigeonhole them into that because they can have a lot of interests. But as they go up through the years, I think instead of them being our students introduced at ninth or 10th grade on some of the careers they could do with the things they enjoy, I think that's going to start a lot younger and give a lot of students access to getting certificates, 2 year degrees, all sorts of stuff before they graduate high school that's going to send them on a trajectory that is really going to be a fulfilling career for them. And I think that's what I'm really excited about when it comes to how we could use AI to lead people to live like more fulfilling lives after graduation.
Amen. Yeah, I love it. Well, look, how about we close with this, and you can take a moment if you want. What's your last little bits of advice? There's going to be different folks watching this, so maybe offer the last bits of advice that we maybe haven't covered, or you just want to reiterate to that kind of teacher persona, the classroom persona, let's say school leadership, school leader persona, and then maybe at the district level. You have closing thoughts for those three groups?
I think they can probably all be the same, which is, um, you know, it's scary, right? There's a lot of stuff we don't know. And that's okay. There's always been periods of time where we don't know what's happening with as technology advances and what's going to change and how that's going to be. But I think my closing thought to all of you is completely stopping and standing still is never going to be a benefit. So even with the moratorium, you still need to be evaluating and monitoring and collecting as much research as in data as you possibly can. Because that way, when the moratorium is lifted, or that way, when we need some advocacy tools to get the moratorium lifted so we can do things, we have data. And you, as educators, have access to so much information that you could easily go and say, this is why we need XYZ. And the only way we're changing policymakers' minds is with data. Anecdotes are great, they're good for the heart, they're good for the emotions, but when it comes down to it, nobody is going to make a law unless they see the reason, the logic, and the success of why they're doing it. So use this opportunity to really get good information because that proves efficacy, it proves fidelity, it proves all the things that we need for these tools in order for them to be able to be available.
Well said. I completely agree. I would close on my side for the group, really, really thinking through how you present information and the ethics behind the use of the tools and the technology that we're using in the classroom. Think about that from your own perspective before you put it in front of your learners. Have expectations, understand what the implications are. Don't just try out the new, coolest, shiniest new thing, right? That's not to say that we don't need to do our research. We don't need to understand what those cool, shiny things are. We need to know what the kids are using, obviously. But think about the ethics of some of those things that we're implementing. Think about the ethics because unfortunately the policy is just not going to be there. It's not going to be fully baked. And every time it is fully baked, every time there's a version that gets pushed out, wherever you are, wherever you work, that policy is going to be outdated very quickly because some tool is going to come along that challenges that, pushes the boundary, or is just out of scope, and there's going to be something that happens. So stressing the ethics and the way that we do things, why we do things, the right and wrong of how we do things, and then critical thinking. Just imparting your learners and saying, look, we can't kind of die on the vine. I feel like our brains are just going to atrophy if we continue to just put everything into AI and we don't think for ourselves. So I think that critical thinking and that stressing of critical thinking and figuring out ways to even challenge AI and to do good research, find truth online, find truth in the real world, and then when appropriate, let AI enable and empower and enrich those experiences. That's my thought. So, Susan, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate everything that you're doing in the state and around the country. Really excited to continue to learn from you, and hopefully we can have another conversation like this. If anyone has any questions, where can they get a hold of you? How can they contact you?
Yeah, sure. My email is susan at k20connect.com, and I am always available to answer any questions.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Take care.
Thanks, Sam.
Hey, thanks for watching. As you know, our mission at Make It Secure is to empower confident, secure, and ethical use of technology. If you want to see more secure conversations like the one you just watched, be sure to hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to see the next conversation.